Hey guys, welcome back to the Predictapalooza Siesta complete teardown and rebuild restoration project. When we last left off, I had wired up the power supply. We powered it up, the tube filaments lit up, and the supply voltages looked okay. I have now proceeded to do what I think will be the most difficult part, which is to wire up the control clusters. Just wrapped up the power volume contrast cluster, and I'm now working on the horizontal, vertical hold, and brightness. It is a treat to use new wiring and the wire wrap tool and put all the connections in rather quickly, but I've made a few mistakes with cutting my wires too short, so I have a few rejects. I've had to rerun things a few times. Definitely better to measure twice and cut once. So I have a few more wires to run for this, or maybe just one more. Then I'll slide some heat shrink tubing over, cut little pieces out, strategically place them along here, and then shrink it up. I forgot to do that while I was wiring these up. I'd already made connections and couldn't get the heat shrink tubing on there, so I used electrical tape on it. Which is what they used originally anyways. Next, I'll move on to, I think, the flyback. I was going to leave that till last, but I forgot it has the yoke connector on it. And I need to run a number of wires from that. For example, one needs to go to the vertical output transformer. So just as soon get that done. And sooner than later. And then the final major thing I think left will be to wire up this. It's a little riser, connects over here, and it is the supply voltages to the cathode ray tube. So that your filament, cathode, grid, and focus. I saved one little wire on there because it has a plug on the end, and that is for your focus. There are several points on the board where you can plug that in. You choose the one that gives you the best focus. It's kind of an oddball thing. It slides onto these stakes, so I wanted to reuse that, but the rest will be new wiring. Believe it or not, I'm actually ready for a power-up test. It's not 100% done. I don't have any input going to the IF, don't even have the tuner out. I just hardwired the linearity control with a fixed resistor, because I need to do a little bit of filing to enlarge a hole to mount a pot, and we don't strictly need those things to power this up and hopefully get a raster. So that's what I want to do now. So I think everything's good to go. I pulled the picture tube out of the set. I double checked all my wiring for the CRT plug. I popped some tubes in. Mostly it's the tubes that came with the set, so we may have some issues with those. I just kind of wanted to see if they had some life left. Alright, so here we go. Alright, I have a voltmeter on main B+. Should be around 275. And go. Current draw looks about normal. Hey, our B+ is right on the money. Don't have a speaker hooked up, so I'm not going to hear anything. B+ dropped a bit. I think I'm running this set a little lean. Yeah, I got about 110 going in there. I'll get this up to 117. This is the brightness control. Okay, we don't have anything. We don't have anything on the CRT. I don't think that 6CG7 I put in there is any good, or at least it's not seating right. It's not lit up, so let me play around with that a little. Okay, it turns out the damper tube was bad, so I replaced that with a new old stock one. I did verify we do have some high voltage, but the real problem was back from when I had tested the CRT, I left the connector off the back of the CRT base, so that has been reconnected now. Let's see if we get something now. Yes, it's faint, but it is glowing. There we go. I measured it high voltage with my probe, and I was only getting around 10 or 11,000 volts, so that's a little low. We might have a weak horizontal output tube. But hey, how is that? That is very, very, very encouraging. I took a tuner out of one of my sets that I know is working, plugged it in, routed the coax into the IF port, put the shield back on, and dug out a speaker. It's not the one that I repaired. Try that later. So let's see if we can get any reception. Oh, something happens when I've changed the channel. See a little snow in there. It's all good. Almost sort of kind of something coming in. Your frequency's just that far off. Geez, at first I thought the core was missing from this coil altogether, but no, it was driven all the way down, completely bottomed out. That's not right. Alright, let's see what we get now. Well, you've good sound, that's something. Aha. Aha. Looks terrible, but it's locked. It is super crazy washed out. Ah. That's better. Turn the brightness down. Recall this CRT tested a bit weak, so we'll just let this run for a while, see if things get better.
This is playing the monitor.
It's playing okay. I played around with the tuner a little bit. There are adjustment slugs for each channel, but I don't want to get too bogged down with this because this is not the tuner that actually goes with this set. I'm a little bit disappointed by the picture tube too. This is with the brightness all the way up, and it really washes out the image. And if I have bright lights on, forget about it. To get a decent image, that's from the brightness down to about that level, in which case you have to watch it in a dark room, like a really dark room. Now that noise is not because of the set, it's because of the way I have my signal source hooked up, so I'm not going to focus on that too much either. I have a splitter going to my signal source, and it's too low a level to get a good solid picture. Well, there have been a number of developments. Let me get you guys up to speed. One, I'm playing it with the repaired speaker. Works fine. Two, the sound was a little weak. Turns out that the alignment on the sound IF was off. I just had to tweak the top coil, got the sound nice and booming. Next, I broke down the tuner, removed corrosion, cleaned it, and put it back together. Put some new tubes in it. It is working fine. Didn't have to do anything to it. That basically leaves the picture. And hey, you can see it now with all the shop lights on. So what changed? What changed was I took a gamble. I didn't record footage because I didn't think it was going to work, but it did, so I'll tell you what I did. One, I rechecked the emissions, and they were terrible. At the 2.68 volts I believe it's supposed to be running on, I only had about 2 ticks on the emissions. Now I say I believe because there's no label on the CRT. So it's pretty sure it's a replacement, maybe even a rebuild. I don't know the tube number. However, the set was wired for the low voltage filament operation, and when I ran it on the 2.68 volts and checked the filament current, it was 450 milliamps, which is what it's supposed to be. Okay, so those emissions were terrible. That explains why the image was so washed out. So what can we do about it? Well, you may have heard me mention in the past that rejuvenation, I've never had any good luck with it. In fact, I've ruined a few picture tubes with it. But in this case, it was basically unusable the way it was, and I do potentially have some replacements on hand if the owner's willing to pay for it, so I figured I would take a chance. So first, this is a Sencor CR70, and it can do a number of rejuvenations. Everything in red are things that will either remove a short or try to improve emissions or cut off. I tried auto restore. That's the most benign thing you can do, and it actually made things worse. I tried the one-shot rejuvenation, didn't do anything. There's supposed to be a visible spark in the electron gun assembly, didn't happen. Went to manual 1 restore, that really didn't do anything. May have again have made things slightly worse. So I went to manual 2 restore, which is the final resort. That improved things. And I went through several rounds of it, 3 rounds I believe, and I got slightly better each time, but then I stopped because I didn't want to push my luck. So after doing all my rejuvenation attempts, I got it to where on 2.68 volts, it's right about at the red-green divide. So it's not great, but it's way better than it was. So what do these various things do? I'll just very briefly. Rejuvenation basically charges up a capacitor and runs the filament hot and discharges the cap through the electron gun. That's why you should see a spark. It's supposed to blow off part of the cathode coating to expose fresh material and improve emissions, but it could also redeposit that material in other elements where it's not supposed to be, or you could blow up in the filament or damage the grid. generally that's not something you want to do unless the tube is just completely unusable. Auto Restore does a gradual pulse of increasing the filament voltage and I think the G2 voltage, maybe the cathode voltage. And you hold down the button and you'll see the needle start to move up and then go down and go up and down and go up and down. It pulses it 3 times and you're supposed to let go. Manual 1, as long as you hold the button down, increases the filament voltage and the voltage on the other gun elements. Manual 2 does the same thing, but even more extremely. So when you're holding that button down, the filament's really glowing bright. And they say on the instructions, don't do it more than 15 seconds. And also, if the needle stops increasing, stop. Even if it's still increasing after 15 seconds, let it cool down, try again. So that's what I did. Because you don't want to blow that filament open. So, right now with all the blazing bright lights on, it's kind of visible. And if I turn them down, it's definitely very, very watchable. That's with the brightness all the way up. Normally you'd be around in here. Notice the focus, the definition of the lines, it's much better. You can see the individual scan lines. And with the brightness all the way up, we don't really get that ghosting, blooming effect. So that was successful, for sure. How long will it last? I don't know. A day, a year, I don't know. Because I don't know what the real issue was. Was the cathode poisoned? Was it contaminated? Was it worn out? We don't know. We never will know. All I do know is it's usable now. So I'm going to leave that as is for now. I cleaned off the exterior of the plastic a bit. There's some gunk on the interior, so I will have to pop this off. I want to get that out. I reinstalled the arms. I painted brass. They're looking pretty good. There is kind of a deep, I thought it was a crack, but now I think it's just a deep scratch in the middle. It's not terrible. Once you know it's there, it's kind of noticeable, but I'll reserve judgment until I clean off some of the gunk on the inside too. There is a crazy possibility though. I do have a couple of these screen covers that are way, way worse. One that has a crack running all the way down the middle, and one that has a big kind of rectangular crack pattern up here. There's no hope for those, but I mean in terms of repairing the cracks. I've heard somebody's seen this, a couple guys have seen this, somebody cut out the interior clear section and leave the exterior reverse painted section. And if you were to look on the inside of this, there is kind of a rib of plastic that extends down. So it gives you a natural place to cut out that center. And supposedly it looks pretty good. Alright, so that's all good news. What's left? The light bulb holder for the tuner. It was pretty rusty, still have a little bit of corrosion to remove. I need to finish that up and install it. Twin lead for the antenna. One of them, the wires is broken off. I gotta do something about that. Then there's the cabinet and the back. I do have the back. It has the antenna terminals. So, well, if that's right, then it is a 17 DAP4. They also put all the tube designators on the inside of the back cover. Missing the power cord. I think I can dig one up. That will work. So really the last major thing is the corrosion on the inside of the cabinet. Now, there was some paint overspray on the tuner. And when I put this in the corrosion remover bath, the paint came off. So I do not want to submerge this cabinet. I think a safer way to go will be to wire brush it and neutralize it and primer it. Oh yeah, and then we want to check out that clock mechanism. Let's do that next. That'll be fun. Hopefully everything is working. is it looks undamaged. Everyone I've seen before has had wires ripped out of it from careless servicemen or who knows what. But this one looks like it's in really good shape. So to test the clock, all I need to do is plug this thing in. So I have my cheater cord going to the AC interlock. PR57 being turned on now. And how about that? We have a functioning clock. It's a little dirty. I'll blow the dust bunnies off. Got a needle oiler around here somewhere. I'll put a few drops of oil on key points. But hey, that is awesome. I did some basic cleaning of the mechanism, reseated the switch, and I believe it's working correctly. I've been unable to locate the owner's manual or instructions for how this works, but going by the printing on the front of the bezel that goes over this and having some clue as to how it was marketed, I think I have it basically figured out. Alright, so normally your power to the TV would come in here. And this chassis is identical to any of the other 17-inch models. What they did is, instead of plugging the power directly here, they put a right angle power cord that runs directly over to the motor mechanism. And that has a new AC interlock, and that's what plugs into the wall. So those are these two wires here. That's your AC voltage coming in. Now one side of that goes directly to this interlock and goes into this primary, the power transformer. The other side goes over to this switch, which is an odd, funky switch. Here, I just happen to have a second one handy so I can take a closer look at it. It's odd because, well, it's only held together by this little clip. This plastic top is not attached to the bottom, so it can fall apart pretty easily. But you put your AC on either side, and this is your switch. What's the actual switch mechanism? Well, it's not really a micro switch. It's this piece of phenolic material sticking out of the side that just goes in and out. Inside, there's just two pieces of metal. And it's just tension on one of the pieces of metal. So it's not, unfortunately, it's not the most reliable mechanism, but we'll give it a go. So right now, it's plugged in, there is power, the clock is running. I'll try to demonstrate how this actually works. First off, let's take a look at the bezel that would go over those controls. On the right-hand side, there's a sweeping yellow arrow that goes 0 to 120. That's for a countdown timer. The left side, we have 4 positions. It's a 4-position switch. Top one is on. If you put it in that position, the TV is just on, period. If you put it in the off position, the TV's off, period. Below that, auto and alarm. That's where I'm not 100% certain how this works. Now for the alarm, there is a red line. And you can move that via the control arm on the back. The control arm on the back has 2 positions. You can pull it in and out. It's this long arm here with the knob on the end. In one position it sets the clock, and the other position it sets the alarm. So I believe when you use the alarm feature, it turns the TV off at a certain time. And auto, I think, turns it off when the countdown hits 0. I think I just accidentally discovered I was wrong about one of the functions. I'll show you what I mean in a moment. Right now, I have the switch in the on position. The set is playing. You can see the indicator light. You can hear it, right? If I go to the off position, TV turns off. Well, the alarm position, that's the one I think I was wrong about. Let's see if I can get it to engage. Or there, sorry, that's the alarm position. I didn't realize this does actually have a buzzer alarm. So, but the TV is also on. So I'm not entirely sure what that's all about. I'm not sure how you turn the alarm off, other than to put this into the off position. Let's change the position on the alarm. Okay. Now for the countdown function, that's where this comes into play. So this can go up to 120, or it goes all the way down to 0, and when it gets to 0, the TV turns off. So if I turn this up a little bit, and we wait, in a minute or two, the TV will turn off. It's not intuitive. It's a little flaky. That's why I'd really like to get the owner's manual, because I don't quite get how the alarm is supposed to work. It buzzes, but there's no obvious way to turn it off other than to turn the TV off. And I don't know if it's supposed to also be turning the TV on or off when the alarm goes off. If it was up to me, and in fact I do have a couple Siesta sets, I would just use the clock. I'd forget about the countdown timer and the alarm and stuff, because it's confusing, and I don't think it's all that reliable, and in an awful lot of these sets I've seen that switch bypassed. Now, Philco didn't make this. It's a Telecron mechanism, so don't, I know it's everybody likes to hate on Philco, but this isn't Philco's. They outsource this part. That's the standard mechanism. You could, there are appliance timers, for example, that use this. So I can kind of jump start it a little bit, so every time a little bit of time has gone by, it turns off. Now what's confusing is it'll do that no matter which of the three positions I put this in. So if I'm in the off position, or I'm in the alarm position, or I'm in the auto position, they all do the same thing. So even in the off position, it's still on until that goes to 0. So I'm thinking if you're just going to be turning it on and off with this, you'd have this at 0. But here's the other weird thing. There's still a power switch for the TV. And this has to be on, otherwise the set doesn't turn on. So even if I go to the on position now, it's not going to do anything. So there's still a power switch. So if I turn this off, the set turns off. Doesn't matter what any of this is doing. The clock will keep running, but the TV turns off, period. So you can actually turn a TV on and off with either this switch or with this switch. But for this switch to work, this has to be all the way down to 0. It's weird. I don't think they completely thought this through, or maybe they had to use whatever clock mechanism was on the market that they could fit into the TV. I don't know, but it seems odd. It's not quite like the more modern sleep timer. Well, I mean, it is in terms of this function, but the on-off auto alarm is goofy, I think. I find it very confusing anyways. And notice it's kind of flaky. So right now the set should be on, I do believe. There we go. So let's see. Let's get this down to 0. We go off, and it should be on right now. But often I have to wiggle that a little bit. Now it's on. So that's why I think you're better off just bypassing and just let the clock be a clock. Right there. Right now it should be on. There we go. I'll put this down so it's just on, and I'll I'll leave the camera running and try to record it actually turning off with the timer.
That Colonel Lawrence's signature is, in fact, a forgery. In the hand of Lieutenant Templeton Peck. Best evidence, will, Your Honor, unless the prosecution can...
So it did eventually turn off, as advertised. And with a little persuasion, it turns back on when I put it into the on position. I just disassembled the CRT housing so I could clean it, and I also wanted to check out what kind of CRT was in it, and what do you know, it is a Philco 17DAP4, but the label's usually over here so you can see it through the back of the enclosure. And the lead dress is not original. These shouldn't be so, these should be taped down. And yeah, there is no grounding hoop. So this is the type where the ground, it's relying on this to touch this, and then this goes onto this collar, and then this rides on the cabinet, and the cabinet is grounded. Later ones had a hoop that came down off the yoke that touched this, and they was connected to one of these wires, because one of these wires is actually ground. So, anywho, I'm thinking that this was replaced with factory CRT at some point. Alright, so, while I've got this apart, I will already cleaned up the face of the CRT. I'll clean up the interior of the cover. I'm looking more at this scratch too, and it's not as deep as I thought. I think there are a couple spots where it goes a bit deep, but a good portion of it is pretty shallow. So I'm thinking a little bit of wet sanding, and same on these scuffed areas, and that could be way less noticeable. So we'll give that a try. There we go, that's better. I put a little masking tape around like they had originally, and I replaced the spacer that was missing, and it turns out that an octal tube box is perfect. So take one, rip off the ears, and dent in one side, like so, and that's where the wire runs for the video. It's supposed to be kept separate from the sweep voltages. Alright, so I'm going to put the back on, and then see what I can do with that front, try to clean it up a little bit better. Alright, working on the front cover now, doing some wet sanding, starting with 800 grit, and using water to lubricate it. There's a scratch going right down here, so going across this way. There's a scuff over here, and one in this area too. I'll alternate directions, 800, 1,000, I think 1,500, and then 2,000 and 2,500 and 3,000. Then I'll switch to some Novus number 2. See, there's some more scratches down there I want to get as well. And one there too. It won't be perfect when I'm done, but I'll probably be able to get about 80% of these scratches out without too much effort. Here's the CRT head reassembled. The wet sanding worked out better than I had hoped for. It's almost defect free now. It's a couple minor blemishes, and you can still see a little bit of the deep scratch here. I didn't want to remove any more material, but if someone was a bit more aggressive, they could probably get even more of those marks out. And I was hoping to wrap up this set in 2 parts, but it's about 0 degrees outside, and it's just too cold to spray on or apply the rust inhibitor and primer to the inside of the cabinet. So there will be a part 3, hopefully a very short part 3, where we can see the set finally completely all back together and playing. For now, that's going to be it. Thanks for watching.